Good afternoon. Hey, before we do introductions, just real quick, tactical point. If you haven't already, it's going to be an interactive session. You'll have a couple opportunities to interact using Slido. So slido.com, then type in #happy, and that'll get you to our event. You can also post questions there throughout the session, and we'll look at those at the end. So you don't have to hold your questions at the end. You do have to wait for your answers until the end, unfortunately. Good? Okay. Ready?
Ready?
Good. We were worried about 4:45, so Patty started a rumor that there was going to be an open bar. I see it worked, and unfortunately it's not true. So thank you, Patty,
Welcome.
for your hard work so far. Good. I'm Justin Black. I lead Glint's people science team. Our team is responsible for the sciences, the methodologies, the approaches that go into Glint's platform, and also the consulting that we do around engagement, performance, and learning, what we call people success, and what we're here to talk to you about today. Patty.
I'm Patti Muldoon, and I am a principal consultant at Glint. That's a relatively recent role for me. I've been working there about 4 months. And in my prior life is when I met Justin. So I was head of employee engagement for a Fortune 50 large diversified manufacturer, global. And I was tasked with building an agile employee engagement program. And so we partnered with Glint, and we've been on a great journey together. So we're going to tell you about it today. And what we really learned through that was the power of focus and simplicity. So we're really going to tell you about a simple, unified approach to both engagement, performance, and learning. So we hope you're as excited about it as we are.
Thanks, Patty.
Welcome.
If you're thinking about joining Glint as a customer, don't worry, we don't poach all of our customers' talent, just the redheads. It's unconscious bias, or conscious bias in this case. Patty and I are here today because we take this mission to heart. We believe that in order to help more people be happy and successful at work, we need a simplified approach and a unified approach to engagement, performance, and L&D. We have a huge opportunity. 90,000 waking hours spent working. I know what some of you are thinking right now. It feels like more than that to you some days. It certainly does to me sometimes. 90,000 waking hours, right? But 1 in 3 of us can't say that we're happy working at our company. Wouldn't tell our friends, colleagues from other places that it's a great place to work, and don't feel a sense of belonging. That equates to 1 billion people globally. So I know that's enough for all of you in here because you're passionate about this work. Knowing that there were 1 billion people you can help, I know it's enough to motivate you all to do something. I'm not worried about that. But how do we motivate our stakeholders that it's time for a significant change in order to help people be happier and more successful at work? And I know how all of you look so forward to taking something that your executives have become comfortable with and changing it. I know what that's like. I've been there. It doesn't have to be so painful. You can make it attractive. One of the best ways to make it attractive is to connect it to the bottom line, obviously, and so showing connections to the bottom line really helps. The relationship between employee engagement and performance is well established, well documented, well reported on. I've taken a selection of stats here from multiple places, including Glint's own customer database, which has about 1 million users added to it a month. And you'll see here some of the key things that are clear across all these databases, right? In the Glint data, organizations scoring in the top quartile on engagement do a better job on Glassdoor ratings for CEO approval, stock price growth, market cap, you name it. They're doing much better than bottom quartile organizations. So if you all care, and we know that engagement and performance and learning is impacting the bottom line, why haven't we been able to move the needle? Why haven't we been able to help more people be engaged, perform at their best, learn and grow, achieve their goals. We're going to focus on, Patty and I are going to focus on 2 reasons today that we've seen most common that we think are solvable. One is that we've been tweaking existing components of our programs over the years. I say we because I've been doing this for 20 years too. The tweaking doesn't work, right? And at some point we have to reimagine what we're doing in the context of today's environment, which wasn't yesterday's environment. The second is that we've been focused on extrinsic motivation instead of intrinsic motivation. We've connected rewards and performance, even though we know that extrinsic motivation has fleeting effects. So those are 2 big things we're going to talk about today. Before we do that, a brief activity. I'm going to ask you in a minute to meet your neighbor and have a conversation. Don't do that yet. I'm going to say go and then do that because timing is important here. So if you haven't had a chance to meet your neighbor, you will now. What I'm going to ask you to do is talk to your neighbor about one HR practice or people practice that you've wanted to change radically and why. And then hopefully share your experience with doing that. The trick is you have 90 seconds each. Go. Okay, stop. That's pretty good. That's much faster than my kids listen to me. Who would like to share what they shared with their new friend and neighbor? Performance ratings. You've tried to blow up performance ratings. Yeah. How's that been going for you? Not well. Yeah. You're not alone. Who else? Retention. What about the retention process, the program? Mm. Yeah. So trying to understand people's needs and trying to involve them so that we can retain them. Yeah, it's a big one. Rewards, just go back to rewards. It's been a traditional mechanism for retention that is ignorant of inclusion, right, and involvement in people's needs. Certainly not ignorant of performance, though, right? So it's still good, good for that. Good. One more, yeah, the back.
Pre-screening personality assessments.
Say that again, sorry.
Personality assessments.
Yeah, what have you been trying to do with personality assessments?
What I want to do with them, or
Yeah.
what the company does.
What would you like to, what would you?
I want to move away from those.
You want to get rid of them. Yeah, it's interesting. So, I lead a team of IO psychologists, and so we all know kind of the data behind the personality tests. And so one of the hardest things I have to do in an offsite is put my team through a personality test battery, because they always say that the scores aren't valid. It's only if they don't like the result that they get, right? But it's true, right? So personality test is another example of things that are really long, that are designed by experts, for experts, and don't really put the employee experience at the center. There are exceptions to that, by the way. There are some personality tests that do that. My team would question some of the validity of those tests too, so it's a longer conversation. Good. So we're not the only ones thinking about disrupting. I have lost count of the number of times an HR partner has told me, my executive will never open an engagement dashboard on her own. I am going to have to go in there and print everything out and write up the insights and deliver them to her. Any of you do this kind of thing? Yeah, some head nods. But when we make it easy for leaders to do it, they actually do it because they want to, right? Good leaders want to use their people data to make better business decisions. They've just had a poor experience with that up until now. We know it's a priority because there's really broad set of data that speaks to this being a priority for leaders. There was a recent Harvard Business Review study. I think the stat was 75% of leaders cited employee engagement and individual employee performance as the number one thing that's going to help them win in their marketplace right now. It's not a shock, but there are other things, right, that you would think CEOs would rate. When we ask leaders why they're not making progress using the HR tools that we've given them today, they tell us broadly 3 things. One of them is that it's not timely enough, right? The data don't keep up with the business cycle, basically is what they're telling us here. I'm making decisions on data that's 6 weeks old. The other is that it's not directly tied to my KPIs. Like, I don't understand how this piece of information is going to help me hit the goals that my boss asks me about every week in an agile organization or every year in a less agile organization. And the third is that it's just not intuitive. Right? We haven't made it easy to take this information and do something with it, or sometimes even to understand what I'm looking at. Right? Does this resonate? Good. Where we end up, unfortunately, when leaders feel this way is scores don't change, performance doesn't improve, and they think that we're not really there to help them as much as we know we're there to help them. Right? So how do we create value for leaders? Through some of the tools that we're providing them, the platforms we're providing them. One of the easiest ways to create value for leaders is to make it more natural for everyone in their organization to bring their best selves to work so that they can be their best selves. This is when we say people success, that's really what we mean. Bringing your best self to work so that you can be your best, or do your best work, right? To be happy and successful. So for happy and successful and doing your best work, we go to the science on motivation. Who can tell me what the two broad types of motivation are? Louder? Yeah, exactly. Intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. So examples, in case you don't know, examples of extrinsic motivation, things like financial rewards or the fear of losing a job would be an extrinsic motivator. Examples of intrinsic motivation, things like the joy you feel after accomplishing a challenging task, the curiosity that you're enabled to bring to your work, the desire to master a new skill. These are things that draw on intrinsic motivation. And unfortunately, traditional HR programs have focused almost exclusively on extrinsic motivation, right? Rewards and consequences. The carrot and the stick, right? Which would be great if our workers were mules. But it flies in the face of decades of human psychology. Study after study has shown that extrinsic rewards have limited power to motivate and to sustain behavior change. Everybody knows Dan Pink? One day I might grow up to be Dan Pink. So if we give students a prize for reading 3 books, many of them won't read a 4th. Certainly not develop a love and passion for a lifetime of reading. Executives who are primarily rewarded for hitting their quarterly numbers, hit their quarterly numbers, and then generally stop. And don't often think about the long-term health of the business. Likewise, if you look at studies on paying people to exercise, to eat better, stop smoking, take their medications, study after study, people change their behavior until you change the extrinsic motivator, and then it goes back to baseline in most cases. Wouldn't you rather have this? This is one of our colleagues in Sao Paulo, LinkedIn. Right? That's an engaged employee. That's people's success there, right? People can be highly motivated to do challenging things without extrinsic rewards. Feeling connected to the work you do really matters when we look at motivation, performance, engagement, retention, agility, all these things that we care about as employees. For some of our customers, we analyze the relationship between their engagement, performance, learning data, and KPIs they care about, like safety, in environments where safety is a big deal. One of the most fascinating things we find in those studies is that the strongest correlates of safety performance, or the number of injuries in a site, for example, are actually engagement drivers like empowerment, purpose, inclusion, even more so in most of these cases than the safety checklists that are the behavioral checklists that are used to evaluate safety, right? Feeling connected to your work really matters for your performance. So that sounds nice. If I say this to most managers, they kind of politely nod their heads and say, okay, how do I do this? It's so much easier for me to give rewards and consequences than to connect with my people on what's driving them intrinsically, they care about at their core. One commonly underleveraged opportunity is growth. Sitting right there for most managers to take advantage of. However you define that. So expanding your skills, diversifying your experience, progressing professionally. People define growth differently. To help people connect with growth as a motivator, you have to know what growth means to them, which means you have to have conversations with people, right? No, I've been doing surveys for 20 years. No survey is going to give a manager the answers they need on the nuances of what growth means to the people on their team. It'll tell them that they're either doing well or not and give them some indication of why, but it's not going to help them on the individual level. So you understand what they need, find opportunities for them to learn and grow, connect them with those opportunities. The key here, and we'll talk more about this in a sec, the key here is integrating this into the workflow. So for example, at Glint we set people goals and business goals internally. Right? So we all have a responsibility to have a people goal, something we're committing to growing professionally on, and then OKRs for our team. So imagine you set a people goal. Your people goal was around new hire readiness in your department. And your engagement data suggests that that goal is at risk because your new hires actually feel a lack of role clarity. And what you get is a simple ping on your phone that says, your goal's at risk, here's why, and here are 3 things that you can do about it right now. That happens in seconds, not weeks or months, which is kind of the current cycle for this type of action. In a nutshell, we think that engagement, performance, and growth have a unified purpose. That unified purpose is happiness and success at work. And that's what we call people success. Okay, we're going to switch to Slido. It's amazing how that E changed to an O so quickly. Oh, that was fast. Patty already switched to Slido. You were so fast. So you've already put in some answers. You can continue to. One word that you think of now that I've started to describe people success that would sum up people success for you. I'll just give you a second. This will be a fun test because it'll be the next slide of the words we use at Glint. We'll see how they line up. Yeah, great. That's about a quarter of you. So engagement, yeah, because I've been talking a lot about engagement. What I'm hoping to do is expand the definition of people success in your minds to include engagement, development, and performance. And I think fulfillment's a big one. We also talk about, let's switch back from Slido to the, yeah. Some of the words that we use, there are more than this. Happy, confident, prosperous, progressing, connected, fulfilled, safe. Right? Positive attributions of our work experience. Okay, now that you know what people's success is, I'm going to actually give you some practical advice on how to implement this in your organizations. So that'll be the next part of our discussion here. We've been studying this for a couple of years, looking at organizations who seem to do it well, trying to figure out why. And we've identified 3 main characteristics of an effective people success approach. We'll talk through those briefly. The first one is that it's holistic, meaning that different sources of input can inform decision making, and that those inputs cover as much of what we care about as possible so that we can weigh all the facts when making decisions about people and about our business using people data. The second is that it provides insights within the existing workflow and work environment, and that those insights are flexible depending on where the business is. So fresh, relevant data is really key here. And a willingness to change things, for example, the inputs that you're giving through your engagement survey as your business needs change throughout the year. The third, and the thing that's probably most core to Glinster values, is people centricity. It's that what we're doing is designed backwards from the individual's needs. Any of you who are design thinking geeks, this will resonate with really well, as opposed to being designed by experts like me, for experts like me, or for HR and finance, which is what a lot of our tools today are kind of co-designed in HR to do. So if you're going to do an approach that's going to help you achieve people success, holistic, agile, people-centric, it also requires a shift. The experience that people have today is really segmented, right? They have engagement here, my feedback over there, I get my learning somewhere else, right? Instead, we'd argue for a unified and person-centric approach that puts conversations at the center. How do we help people have more regular, higher quality conversations, better informed by data, and data that can change over time? So we're not asking them necessarily to talk about the same thing every week or every month or every quarter. So what do we talk about in these conversations? We've identified 5 things that we think you can implement today that'll provide focus to conversations, and I'll talk about how to bring in each of these categories. It's easy to remember, and I think useful. We use it on our team for personal reflection, for one-on-one conversations, for team conversations, for career conversations. It really is a framework that you can use in a lot of situations. The first is about fit. Does my role play to my strengths? Do I feel like I belong here? The second is about focus or alignment, you call it also. Do I know what I'm supposed to be doing? And do I get feedback in time to course correct when I'm off track? Do I have the resources and support I need to do my job effectively? Am I doing work that's having a meaningful impact? Am I progressing professionally? It's 5 questions. If you can answer yes to all 5 of these questions, you're more than not likely happy and successful at work. Right? If you can't answer yes to all of these questions, you know you have something to work on, and that's no big deal. The thing I love most about this is it's cyclical. So if I get to growth, if I'm yes until I get to growth, and I get to growth and it's no, I can then go back to the beginning and reevaluate whether this is the right job for me. Right? We found this really helpful in identifying opportunities for internal mobility. So we're asking people to reflect in deeper ways on skills that they need, ways they'd like to stretch themselves, and then we as managers can help connect them with those opportunities. The people success approach done right creates structure that clears the path. Right? It provides focus, it guides you down it, and it helps you build habits that keep you going when the flashlight battery runs out. Right? It's kind of the way to think about this. Let's talk about each of these for just a second, and then Patty's going to tell her story. How many of you have read any books or research on nudges? It's a popular topic. Good, some of you. Nudges are real, so there's systemic settings in the environment that kind of opt you into doing things, right? Make it natural for you to do things. It's a little bit more than a reminder. A reminder is just a reminder. A nudge is a little bit more systemic. Structure is a form of nudge, right? It provides a system in which things happen naturally. So the way we think about doing this, when you're ready to implement a people success program, what we do is start by mapping out the decisions that are being made, the key decisions that are being made on a calendar. Every month, we just make a list. When are we doing talent review? When are we making comp decisions? When are we setting budget? When are we forecasting sales for the year or for the quarter? And then we think about feedback. What's the feedback we're going to need from employees to make smart decisions in each of those months? When do we need an engagement survey? When do we need open-ended feedback, like a suggestion box? Maybe it's after a town hall, right? Then we look at goals. how do we line up people and business goals and goal setting to that decision-making cycle? If we're setting goals once a year, but decisions we're making are once a month, we're probably out of alignment in some ways. Key here also is to have people and business goals. And then now that we know when we want to set goals, how we want to get feedback, what decisions those are going to inform, how do we have conversations? How frequently? What gets included in them? And what we typically do here is say, so typical examples of this are, we're going to have a weekly check-in. We're going to ask everyone to have a weekly one-on-one check-in with their direct reports, or semi-monthly. Right? In that, we're going to suggest that the agenda be the following thing. It's going to have these couple of items. Every month, we're going to ask managers to talk about focus and support, or enablement. And once a quarter, we're going to ask them to also talk about growth and fit. It's a good way to use the 5 pillars to set an agenda for managers so they don't have to think about it, right? They just have the conversation. Insights. What are the data that you're going to need to look at and the connections across the data to inform leaders as they make these decisions? If you can map out these 5 things on a calendar, you're 50% of the way there to putting your program into place. It's hard work, but we've actually seen people do it in a 2-hour working session. So if you can take the time to do it, you'll have these slides and some of the notes to guide you along. 5 pillars. This is how we get focus, right? So use the 5 pillars to provide focus in these conversations. So we know what we're supposed to talk about. We know what we're supposed to reflect on. Habits. A few core habits can help managers and employees keep these actions going. The first one's about conversations. We've talked about this a little bit already. What we've seen be most successful is regular conversations. Whatever that means in your organization, for a lot of our customers, it's weekly one-on-ones and semi-monthly team meetings. Goal-setting habits. Our most effective customers are setting goals in an agile way, typically on a quarterly basis with the ability to change them as conditions change, and lots of communication about them throughout the quarter. Feedback habits. What's the best way to get good feedback? Seek it, right? It opens you up to receiving it, and it makes it more likely that you're going to get it. Anybody who's a Neuroleadership Institute geek, we can have a conversation after. It's one of the things I like about neuroscience, is the science on seeking feedback. Improvement in our action-taking habits. We have a really simple framework we use internally when we identify one of the 5 areas that isn't working so well. And it spells ACT. It's really easy to remember. Acknowledge where we are. We have these what we call let's face it conversations, right? Let's face it. Right? We're not in a good place here. Collaborate on a focus area. Work with others, figure out what to do, and take one step forward. Just one step forward. That's it. Build momentum. It matters. It matters a lot. Simple habits like regular conversations have an outsized impact on people's success. Managers who are in the habit of having regular conversations with their people have people who are more focused, more committed, and feel better supported. At this point, I generally hear this. No offense. I know it seems like a big change. I know it seems like a lot. It is in some ways. But let me tell you, I've seen hundreds of companies do this. One of them was UTC. And thankfully, I don't have to tell that story because Patty's here, and she led that effort, and she can tell you. There you go.
Thanks. So theory, right? It's a great model. Love it. It's got a lot of science behind it. What does it look like when you actually go try to implement this? And I have maybe 3-4 slides. It looks really clean on here. I tell you, it's messy and it's wonderful, and it's a lot of change management. So for the sake of the case study, this is global fusion. You're a leader. You've been there a long time. It's a big company, 200,000 people around the world. You get a new CEO. Comes in. We're going to change the culture. We really need to change the culture because It's critical, it's imperative. We're not going to stay leaders in this business unless we change the culture. What do we need? We need to move much faster. We need to be agile. We need to be innovative. We need to be collaborative. And most of all, we need to be empowering. This is an old company. I mean, businesses that have been around more than 100 years, pretty methodical. We sell to the military. We have a lot of military folks. So there's a lot of command and control, a lot of processes, a lot of gates. And you know that can be pretty stymieing when we're trying to make agile decisions, right? So you, as a leader, you are completely bought in because you've lived this. You're like, oh, everything takes so long. Great, I am on board. I'm so glad we have a new CEO, but how do you do it, right? And you are one of 25,000 leaders around the world. So do we think that the statement by the CEO is going to motivate everyone and is going to just create change across this organization? What do you think? Yeah? No? No. So with this, we knew that making this change, we would need to use some systemic lever to continue to reinforce this new culture that we knew we needed to move toward. Supports for managers, supports for employees, reinforcing time after time where we wanted to go. So what we used as that systemic lever, that thing that was going to be built into the flow of work time after time, was an overhaul of our engagement process. Now, we were very fortunate in that employee engagement was very important to the company, and we had embedded in our DNA the way that we did surveys and the way we acted on them, and it was a process that worked really well about 10, 15 years ago to get people talking about engagement. But we'd survey about once a year. It was very top-down cascade of results, who gets to see them first, and it just wasn't timely, and it wasn't creating the change in the conversations and the focus toward empowerment that we needed. So we knew we needed to blow that up and create something that was going to help people change their behavior and reinforce to do what the CEO wanted them to do. So there was a lot to the change management. We created 3 surveys every year that were very tiny, 9 questions each. Now, when you choose 9 questions for an engagement survey, you're choosing the things very strategically that are going to take the organization toward this new empowered organization. You're going to create questions that are going to be useful to the managers because the managers all throughout the organization are the ones who need to embrace this, not look at this as a tool that is telling them they're not doing things right, but instead giving them very valuable information about their employees and a way to change. So a lot in between there and now, but what happened? What was the impact that we saw? Well, the first pulse survey that we did, we got in this word cloud here and all the comments. You can see we got a very good, transparent validation of where we knew our culture was. That sort of command and control, top down. You see some red words very large in there. Fear, upper management is in red. Workplace is in red. So I don't think this was a big surprise to anyone. So along with these pulse surveys, we delivered a lot of support, a lot of action, and our HR leaders around the globe were really co-opted into helping the managers see their role in this. And the first thing was have a conversation, acknowledge where we are, talk to the employees about what they've told you and what else. One step forward, simple actions. What are we going to do differently in our little group? So with those, we took another pulse survey about 6 months later, and you can see the bottom. So the colors are sentiment. So red is negative and blue is positive. And you can just see the dramatic difference. And the large words in blue, you've got transparency, achieve, leaders. That's a dramatic visual. When you look at the data on the left, the analytics for the comments in the solution are really brilliant. We get 300,000 comments. And it can theme and it can tell you the sentiment. So we could see from one survey, one pulse survey to the next, that the positive comments went up by 19 points in those 6 months. So, and I will tell you that this is not something that just you can see on the paper. This was felt. And you read through all the comments, it's like, we have a long way to go, but I feel like something is changing. And we're having these conversations. And really, the pulse surveys on their own, it's the catalyst for those quality conversations that happen about 3 times a year, and intermittent with those new performance conversations that we transformed at the same time to get rid of ratings and have check-ins and forward-looking. So those 2 pieces are very complementary. So we knew that we were well down the road to the impact that the CEO was looking for, the culture change. How do you sustain it? Can we sustain it? So pulse survey 1 year in, and the empowerment question, which has been our strongest focus, when we looked across all the different segments of employees, we had significant movement up by about 6 points on the empowerment question. Now, when you look at statistical, and this is 200,000 employees, that's huge, right? So we knew we were on the right step. We've got the comments, we've got the ratings, even in the production maintenance organization. So on the bottom, this is a real achievement. What the bottom data is, that's just those folks who the first time we asked them said, I really am not having an empowered experience. They were sort of the bottom of the barrel there. And those folks, when asked a year later, 32 points higher. So not only are we working with those folks who are stars and we're probably engaged and we're maybe empowered to begin with, not those people that were on the fence, but those who really, really needed that empowerment experience the most. And this just gives me chills when I look at this, and you can feel it in the organization. So, when I look at these, it's an engagement survey, but it's completely intertwined with performance and learning, because through those conversations, we're taking and we're focusing people on where they need to focus to learn and grow, and setting goals based on this. So we're really using that holistic, unified way to talk about culture. And the journey continues. It is not over. But this has made the biggest change in the way the place feels and the way we solve problems going forward. So we are a very large, complex organization. So when folks say, I don't think it's going to work here, we did it. So, there's a lot of this that can apply to most organizations. Right.
Patty's in control of your questions.
I think. Let's see.
While she's doing that, Cliff Notes,
They're not coming
in case you
through.
were zoning out. They're not coming out?
There's none coming through.
Okay, we can just
No,
ask
it's
people.
good. Okay. Yeah.
Happiness and success. Simplest way to think about people's success. Are you happy and successful at work? Unified purpose, unified approach, right? Engagement, performance, learning together. If you're going to do this, be holistic, be agile, put people at the center. Approaches should have structure, provide focus, build habits. And if you only do one thing, if you don't do any of that other stuff, take the 5 pillars back or make your own and give your people a really simple way to reflect on their own people's success and have conversations about it. Okay? Let's take questions. We have a couple minutes.
So I don't know
pop up.
if they are starting to pop up. Can you switch to the Slido? I don't know if that's going to work, but I've got them here. So can you talk a little bit more about what happened in between the pulse surveys? So we did a lot of change management beforehand for the main stakeholder groups, the managers and HR, that said, Once you get your results, manager, and they're very specific to yours, you're going to have these conversations, and here are a lot of guides as to how to have those conversations. And we had HR that helped to reinforce or to coach those folks who didn't feel comfortable doing it. I will say the very first time we did that, certainly not 100% of the managers were on board. But we said, we're not going to wait until everybody's on board. Kind of go ahead and do the survey. 50% of them got it. It really was, most of the changes were those conversations and empowering the decisions that were empowered or delegated down to employees, that we stopped micromanaging so much. That's what most of the employees say. My manager is listening to me and I make more of my daily decisions.
Yeah, and Patty, as I reflect on what you did there, one of the things that stands out to me is you were able to build champions with a couple of really key leaders internally, actual business leaders, and get them to do the things that we wanted all the other managers to do, and be empowering and expect other people to do it. It became part of regular goal setting, which I think is the key to integrate it. Let's take one more.
Yeah, another. How do you handle managers who think entry-level employees are replaceable?
Fire them? Just kidding. That's a big question. I do think, you all have this experience where you have managers who are promoted because they're great at their individual contributor role. So, and if any of you were here last year and saw Jeff talk about soft skills, it's the biggest gap right now we see in the LinkedIn data, the ecosystem data, economic graph data is on soft skills. So I think investing in building soft skills is important, and frankly, investing in hiring the right managers is important. And if you have executives who recognize value clearly, your frontline employees, contract workers, whatever they are for you, you should have managers to do the same thing. But that is a much bigger conversation, and I'm happy to stick around. We'll need a drink for that one. Happy to stick around and have that one. Okay, we're out of time now. Thank you so much for coming. Have a great conference, and see you soon.
Thank you.